Hi, everybody, and welcome to Two Crones and a Microphone. I am Betty,
And I'm Sally.
and we are cultural midwives. Our podcast is about sharing wisdom through storytelling and research from us as experienced crones and friends. We offer experiences and spiritual practices for your body, mind, emotion, and spirit to meaningful connect with our beautiful Mother Earth, walk your talk, and act from your heart's desire instead of fear. Maybe that is what everything depends on now, the courage to choose love over fear. I'm going to repeat that. The courage to choose love over fear of what feels like chaos and is unknown. We're in the thick of it, folks. But you know what? We're going to help you get through it with our wonderful podcast, our classes. We have all these wonderful techniques that you can use to help you get through what I call the muddy waters of our time.
Yeah. And I love it, Betty, because one of our listeners commented that listening to our first podcast, the one that Linda and I did on water, she's looking at her relationship with water in a completely different way. An element that many of us take for granted in this country. She's looking forward to hearing more about this sacred relationship, which we're talking about today. So, today we're giving you everyday spiritual practices to strengthen your relationship with the element of water.
But before we start, I want to address the fact that Linda is off on a fun vacation. And we're wishing her well. She's going to come back all refreshed, and I'm sure with a whole bunch of other learnings and stories. And she'll be back on I believe, our next podcast. I also want to thank the Minerva Educational and Wellness Treatment Center for sponsoring this podcast. And as most of you know, we have a strong relationship with Minerva. So if you go to minervaed.com, you can look and see what classes we're offering. There is one online that Sally did, and the rest are being given here right now at Minerva. So just check it out, see what you think.
Okay. Many of us in North America are used to just turning on the tap and having clear, clean, fresh, and sometimes even cool water. Maybe you have city water, and maybe you have a well. And unless you lose electricity, water access is generally pretty easy for most of us. We learned this past year that major events like hurricanes or fires can change that for people in just a minute, just a hot minute, actually.
No pun
So,
intended.
right, kind of. That was accidental. So,
So, as a lot of you know, I moved up here 30 some odd years ago. And by here, I mean the Pocono Mountains. And we are in a rural mountainous area from this city. And everything was very, very different. And one of the big differences was we receive our water here at the house from a well. I was used to I grew up in Brooklyn, Queens, lived and worked in Manhattan. Turn the tap, the water comes on. You don't really think a whole lot about it. I knew it came from upstate New York. That's about all that I knew. And I really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But when I got here, I realized if you don't have electricity, you have nothing to pump the water out of the well. So guess what? You turn on the tap and there's zip, absolutely nothing. That was a big shock to me. People have different kinds of wells here. My husband was very smart when he built the house years ago. He made the well twice as deep as it needed to be. And he was very smart in doing that. And I'll tell you why later in the podcast. But it's been a huge help to us to have access to that much water.
and I've had the opportunity to live kind of all over the country with many variations of how I got my water, but my favorite was when we were living in the mountains of Colorado and got it through wooden pipes. It was clear and fresh and came out at about 36 degrees. So
Oh,
if you liked cold water from the tap, which I personally do, it was the most pristine water ever. And I've never had water as delicious since then, actually. That's kind of funny. But thinking about that, the pictures that you have of women hauling water in South America, Betty, I know Bob has pictures of people carrying water on their heads in Africa. I don't think we think about carrying our water in pails or buckets or jars on our head quite the same way as other people do in other countries, where that is how they get their water. And I think, those experiences, because you've had them, Betty, you've seen them.
I have, yeah. And it was, you know, most of you know I'm a nurse and I was in the military. And when we would do our medical missions out in these remote villages, I was in South America and Central America. I see these women carrying these humongous jars on their head, going, sometimes walking a mile or two, and then having to walk a mile or two back, balancing this jar, right? No surprise to me. Guess what? A lot of them were coming to us with complaints of neck pain and headaches. Of course, if you're going to do that every day, and the older you get, honestly, the harder it gets. So, yeah, there are a lot of young women, but there are a lot of older women carrying these jars also. So, the other thing that we did, and, the American military has done a lot to help other countries. Our Army Corps of Engineers would go in and dig a well in the village. And that was really, they'd had feasting and all kinds of ceremonies around the well because they were so happy that they didn't have to walk so far. I mean, that was a big plus. We don't even think about this in our country because most of us, and let me say that there are remote areas that don't have water. I understand that. But for the most part, we have pretty good access to water in this country. So we don't realize that there are other places that do not and how precious it is. It's precious because the water that's brought back from that well 2 miles away is used for cooking, bathing, drinking. It only goes so far and you only make one trip a day. So you really kind of have to ration the water that you're using, bathing a baby, um, washing the vegetables. Most of them, a lot of them subsisted on, say, manioki root, which came from one of the trees. Well, you have to kind of wash that before you eat it, right? It'll keep you alive, but you have to wash it. So there again, we have the water. So we take it for granted here, but we really shouldn't. We really shouldn't.
Well,
When Oh Shinnah started to teach us about conservation, uh, I remember the 80s. Now, this is before I was in the military when I first started to sit with her. And she was talking about conservation of water. And I remember thinking, wow, that's never going to happen here. Well, it does, as evidenced by the wildfires in California, but we're not going to go into that. The point is, it wasn't until I saw the people in other parts of the world struggling that I realized that she was absolutely right, that there's always the chance that things will dry up and the water will not be as accessible to us. And so she taught us many, many conservation practices. And Sally, I know you have like a whole list of them, but what would be your favorite? What would be the one you practice every single day?
so this is something, good question and good point. I think one of the things that she did that maybe woke a lot of us up, and certainly to a certain extent woke me up, was just thinking about the relationship that we have with water. And this is a question I would ask our listeners. How many of you grumble when you wake up in the morning and see that it's a rainy day? maybe even a curse word slips out because you have things that you were going to do and it's going to make it more difficult because it's raining. Maybe you were going to a soccer game to watch your grandchild play or what, and now you're thinking, oh, I'm going to have to drag an umbrella. I'm going to have to change what I'm going to wear. I might have to put galoshes on, and then I'm going to have to sit there in the rain. And so what we're essentially sending out is all this unkind thoughts about water and the gift that rain actually is. So maybe it seems like an inconvenience, but remember that acknowledging the rain rather than cursing the rain and giving it thanks because it waters our plants. It fills those really hard dug hand wells that people have. In some parts of the world, people don't get enough water at all. And we have friends who live, for example, in the Southwest, where water is a scarce commodity. And I think, maybe people I imagine, I have lived in the Southwest myself, but I imagine that people that live in the Southwest maybe have a different thought about water because it is really dry there and they don't get rain often. But I've lived also in places where there's a lot of water, like Pacific rainforests and stuff, where I admit sometimes I'm like, ugh, I did curse the water. I didn't listen to what Ocean has said about just being grateful that it's raining and that water, when it comes down, really goes to everywhere in the world. So remembering to bless the water is really one of the things I do try and do on a daily basis. But, practical things like taking shorter showers. Maybe you're a person who takes a shower for an hour. Well, I admit my showers maybe tops 5 minutes. So, and I really adjusted that from Oshna, who said, stop taking long showers, that wastes water. By conserving faucets or shower heads that conserve water in a different way. They have toilets that are, the amount that flushes, depends on what you're flushing it for. And so those are kind of built-in water conserving ways of doing things. Turning off the water rather than letting it run when you wash your dishes or even brush your teeth. Because I remember growing up, right? We ran a basin of water and we washed the dishes. At the end, we had really gray water, which could still be used to water plants or to take outside and just put on the earth because it's gray, it's not dirty, in that kind of semi-dirty phase, if you will have it. But you can still do things with it that are helpful. But a lot of times now I see people just washing the dishes with the water running. And so, in a conservation way, really a basin of water is the way to go. Anyways, did you want to share some? Because I know, Betty and I have talked about this, of course, beforehand. And I could keep on talking, but if you want to jump in with any of your favorites, that would be great.
Um, I think it's my favorite thing to do, when I get in the shower in the morning, is I always bless the water. I thank the water spirits for being there to clean me off. I mean, there were times in the military we didn't get a shower for days and days on end, which was not lovely. And I actually come from the days when I first got in, we were washing out of a helmet sometimes. You can't do that with the new ones, the Kevlar. But that's what you had. That's what you used. So I really came to appreciate the fact that when water is accessible, you can use it at your leisure, really at your leisure, and drink it at your leisure. Our water, when we were out in the field, came from what we call a water buffalo. So it was this big thing that they brought in. And I remember one year, like the showers, we had a shower tent. So all of us would be going into the tent, and there'd be like four of us under this spigot that had four shower heads on it. And I I found out inadvertently they were getting the water from a pond or something close to where we were bivouacked. All right. And they had put so much chlorine in it. And I was wondering, what the heck? My hair's getting so dry. What's going on? They just about fried the hair on my head, with all the chemicals that they had to put in it. How healthy was that? So coming home, I was so grateful for the water we get out of our well, because we don't have to deal with all of that. It's just a hot mess, right? We had a water pipe rupture in the basement a couple of years ago. Everything had to be replaced, going down to where the well was. And I was busy out there doing my blessings on those pipes, like bring us that fresh, clear water, keep it running, keep it running. So it helped me establish my relationship with the water that comes from the ground here. I also have a relationship with the water, the ocean waters, and ocean water taught us many ceremonies that involved going to the ocean, or could do it with a pond, even, or a lake. We have many lakes around here, and I have visited them and communicated with them. I know Linda told us that story about her singing to the waters, and I can relate to that. I understand that. That's energy that you're putting out, saying thank you. Thank you for your nourishment. Thank you for blessing us. Thank you for being here. So yeah, that was basically my takeaway from her. And when we have every year we have a meeting where a lot of our friends come together for a week. We conserve water then also. The old if it's mellow, flush it. If it's mellow, oh God, how does that go?
If it's yellow, it's mellow.
Thank you.
If it's brown, flush it down.
Yes.
One of my ones that I always go, ew, because I just think my mother would be saying, no, that is not
Oh yeah.
ladylike.
That's true. That's true.
Flush
But
the toilet after yourself.
it saves my septic system. It doesn't have to be pumped as frequently. When you've got like 10 people in your house, which has happened, and sometimes more, you have to really think about how much water you actually using, you know? So there you go. If it's mellow, if it's yellow, it's mellow. So just go with that, and things it will help conserve the water that you need.
I love that. The other thing that I think is one of my favorites, but one that I had a hard time getting over was spitting.
Mhm.
So giving of our own waters is the way that that was framed by Oh Shinnah, and that one of the gifts that we can give the earth or give in exchange for things is to give of our own waters, which means to spit. So it was really a challenge for me when, I first heard this. I was like, oh no, I can't spit. Spitting is just gross. But, well brought up ladies, don't spit ever. Don't spit ever. But I invite you to think about giving of your own waters to the earth with gratitude. And it might be that you're giving it to the earth. It might be that you're picking up a rock. And, we have talked in other podcasts about, traditional ways of giving where we use cornmeal or tobacco. But if you don't have that with you, and you find something along the way as you're taking your morning walk or whatever, to think about that exchange that could actually be giving of your own waters, which is fitting. I invite you to play with that, and feel free to, if you try it, to, get back with us and let us know how that goes. There's also something about mingling your water in a glass of water and using that as you spit as well. So it's not quite as difficult for me to spit in that way, because you kind of do that when you brush your teeth, except that you're not using the toothpaste you're drinking, and then you're kind of releasing that into the water. And that could be a way of blessing your septic system. It could be the way of blessing your running water if you're getting it from city water. And just a way of being conscious and being grateful for the gifts that water does bring us.
I have
Right?
to tell you, I just had a sudden memory. I had my grandchildren out when they were little, and I don't remember what I did. I don't know if I picked a flower or picked something up, but I did spit. Oh my God, they were horrified. Oh my, what did you just do? So it gave me the opportunity, though, to explain to them exactly what I was doing. I was actually blessing the earth. Their faces were still a little skeptical, but okay, they just chalked it up to me being Oma and being different. So, but it's actually an excellent practice because you always have that with you, right? How many times have I been out? I didn't have any cornmeal or tobacco. Maybe I was walking Luna. I went to pick something up or move something or bless something. I would have to use my own spit. So gotten a little more comfortable for me over the years. But I do remember Sally being like, oh my God, yuck, when she first taught us that. Like, oh, all right, fine.
And I'm always, when I think about it, how many traditions and spiritual traditions that use the blessing of different waters um, for different things. So, in our wisdom practice today, we wanted to just give you some practical tips on bathing in a sacred way and, ways to nurture yourself and relax with water. So we often think about sacred bathing. You have to have a bathtub, or right now, a lot of people have those freestanding clawfoot bathtubs or jacuzzi bathtubs. But what if you don't? What if you don't? What if what you do is showering? Does that mean you can't sacredly bathe in the waters? And so I know Betty has some practical tips for that she uses that I think personally are great.
Well, yeah, in my house, we have a bathtub, but it's made for a kid. Yes, I'm small, but I'm not that small. So my bathing days are pretty much over. Um, so what I have done though is I have gotten a basin of water and done a foot bath that I have blessed, or I've taken my hands and put them in water and work with it that way. So the water is still blessing me. I am blessing it. If I'm doing a hand or a foot bath, I'll make sure to put in essential oils. I may put a little salt in. I may put in some herbs, say rosemary for remembrance, so my brain will continue to work properly. Lavender, of course, is my favorite. I can get that, actually, I get the rosemary and the lavender right out of my garden, put that in. The advantage of using a foot bath or a hand bath is I don't have to worry about the tying up the herbs so that they don't clog up my drain. And the essential oils, I still will mix that with either some vodka or some whole milk, not fat free, whole milk, so that they will disperse in the water. Essential oil is just what it says it is. It's an oil. So it'll float on the top of the bath. And if you've done a warm bath and your pores are open, and if you used any kind of a mint, that will really, like, it may sting. You don't want that when you get out. You might be going, whoo, what happened there? So better to mix it up.
Of course, if you want that refreshing zing and you
Yeah.
like the kind of prickly feeling, you don't need to do that, I guess. I don't know. I make a scrub ahead of time, actually, that I keep in a container by the bathtub where I use the essential oils, and I usually use cedar and or sage oils because they have the cleansing property and energetic
Mm-hmm.
cleansing property. Like when you're burning sage or you're burning sweetgrass or cedar, that smoke has that cleansing property. But you can also mix it with like Epsom salts or sea salt. I like to use sea salt, and I put the oils, and I do literally mix it, and I mix it with my hands, and then I put it in a container, and you can just throw a little scoop of that into your bath water if you're doing a bath, or into a foot scrub if you're doing a foot scrub, and or add a little bit of oil if you're trying to soften your skin or nurture yourself in that way. Um, Not that I don't like lavender or mint, but I do usually use sage or any of the pine resins, actually, because you can get essential oils for all of those.
Yeah. And
And I
your
love the
your
smell.
earth
I love this.
yeah.
Yeah, I love the smell of it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
When you put it in the water, it's just a great, it's a great smell.
Just a
Anyways,
caveat, if you're doing this in the shower, some people will do that and they may put some oil on their skin. Please, please be careful because the bottom of the shower is going to become slippery. All right. So just remember that we, as a nurse, both of us have seen injuries that have a lot of injuries that occur with people in the shower slipping. So, or even getting out of the bathtub. So just
yeah.
be aware. Just be aware.
One of the advantages, I think, probably of mixing the salt with the oils then, because then you can just do this. I know that those of
Mhm.
you who are listening to the podcast do it can't see what I'm doing, but it's just rubbing the palms of your hands together with the salt begins to dissolve then, and you can put it on your body and do it in that
Excellent
way.
point. Excellent point.
Yeah.
You know,
So
one thing we didn't mention is the fact that when you move into a place like we're living, we both live in an area now where there are wells and not uh, easy access to water is, and we'll be talking, we did talk about, no, we didn't talk about the element of fire, did we? So we will be talking about that.
no, we did. We did.
Okay, I thought we did. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I missed one of those. It's okay. Um, I think that you just have to honor that spirit of fire because we don't have any fire hydrants up here. So if there is a fire, they have to get water from wherever it's available. I'm fortunate I have a swimming pool here. We could draw water from there until they can get the truck up that has water in it. But still, and there is a pond down at the end of the road. One of my neighbors, her house did burn down. It's just down the road from me. And they had to draw water from the pond down the road, which is like a half a mile down, to get the water up here to put the fire out. And it's really something that makes you become very aware of the fact that how strong the elements are, which is why we're talking about elements, right? So yes, we did talk about fire. We're talking about water now. We're going to be talking about wind. We're going to be talking about the earth. All these things that make up the fabric of who we are living on Mother Earth. And all these elements are really part of who we are. Water especially. What are we, 98% water or that's why they keep telling you drink water,
Yeah.
water.
Tricky. Different
Mhm.
sources tell us different percentages of water that we are, but yeah. I think, for a more detailed discussion on ritual bathing, because we didn't want to do it necessarily on the podcast, look for the short that we're going to have up on YouTube posted during the last half of May about sacred bathing in any more kind of ritualized way that we've just talked about ways to make your everyday bathing more sacred. But we're going to put up a short that really dips into that even deeper and with pictures and different things. So it's easier to do that in a posted short than to try and do it on the podcast itself, because then many of you can't see what we're doing. Or if you're driving, it's difficult. You're trying to get your head wrapped around what we're talking about in the
Mhm.
middle of doing something else that you're doing. So keep your eye out for that. Um, yeah. And remember our four pillars here at Two Crones and a Microphone, right? Our touchstone is Oh Shinnah, and we've mentioned her a lot today. The way she lived her life and the teachings that she brought to others that have, changed the life of so many others. Our own collective life wisdom as crones, right? Not many have had the same experience Betty has of working with women who are coming to her with neck ache, back aches, and headaches because of carrying heavy, heavy jars of water on their head for decades, right? For decades,
Yeah.
every day. Our interesting guests who we interview, and some of you may have watched the last interview that we had. We hope that you will tune into it. It got posted today. And it's with Gudrun of Mount Pleasant Herbery. And so she's talking about really her life with herbs, and it's delightful. I hope that you'll tune into it. And we're recording today early, but that video is coming out today, which is May 1st, actually. So happy May Day, everybody. And then your responses. We're creating community. So see the Two Crones and a Microphone.com website for in-person and online classes, as well as looking at minervaed.com. And remember, we always want to hear what your favorite podcast or wisdom practice has been if you try them out.
And we love your comments, because with your comments are what help drive our podcast. Are you interested in the elements? Is there something else you want to hear about? I mean, please just let us know. And if you have any comment about what we're saying, we would love to hear that also. So on that note, I think it's time for us to probably sign off. We want to honor your time. And of course, my sign off is, we're helping you to navigate the muddy waters of our time. Please keep listening, like us, share this wisdom, because boy, people need it today. They really do.
And if you haven't signed up for our monthly newsletter for a more in-depth look on a variety of topics that we talk about in the podcast, and some a little bit outside the context of the podcast itself, please sign up. Our main newsletter features frog as the harbinger of spring. And don't forget to check out the blogs posted on our Two Crones website. Stay tuned to our next series of podcasts as we move into working with the element of earth, which Betty mentioned. Perfect for this time of year, digging into the earth and all the earth has to offer us. So,
with the ways of, in the words of Linda, look for your glimmer.
Kiddush Day.
Kiddush
May
Day.
you walk in beauty. Remember, all is made beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, if you're enjoying Two Crones and a Microphone, please like this video and hit the subscribe button. Enjoy timeless wisdom from modern times, all served up by women in the know.